Welcome to Innovation Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. On this episode, we get to have Eugene Tutunikov. He's the CEO of SwissWatchExpo, which there is a family-started business. They bootstrapped it over $100 million valuation. Last year, they did $94 million in sales. This year, closing in $110 million. Used to be at Citi, back in my old stomping grounds, and I'm super excited for this conversation. Eugene, thanks for coming.
Jess, thank you so much for having me. I think this is going to be a lot of fun, and I've been looking forward to it since the year began.
Well, I love your family came over 35 years ago from the Ukraine with nothing, and have really lived the American dream and proved anything is possible. Your past doesn't have to determine your future. It's an incredible story. I'm hoping to hear all about. For people who aren't familiar with SwissWatchExpo, can you talk about what you guys do, where you fit in the market, and maybe a little bit about why it's been so successful?
Yeah, sure. We're one of the largest e-commerce players in the pre-owned luxury watch space. And when you go online, most of the companies you see are marketplaces. We actually own our inventory. We have over 3,000 luxury watches in inventory, which is the biggest collection in the country and potentially the world unit-wise. It's a very complex business in terms of sourcing the watches. We have a 12-person department that authenticates and refurbishes all the watches that come through our doors. There's a big problem with fakes in the industry. They're estimating about 40 million replica watches are being sold each year. Most of them are easy to spot fakes, but some of them are getting much better. So we have invested very heavily into a department to authenticate and refurbish every single watch that comes through the doors. We don't sell any watches that have not gone through that process that we don't own outright. We cherry pick our collection and we sell only the best brands in the best quality condition for pre-owned watches available anywhere in the world. The business was bootstrapped. We started with about 60 watches in inventory. Now we have over 3,000. The last 9 years, we've been growing at an average pace of about 40% per year. And it's a huge market, and we could expect to continue very healthy growth for the next handful of years as well.
Well, congratulations on all the success. But I almost feel like you get an extra congratulations for your family bootstrapping this. I mean, it's one thing to raise $70 million and get your valuation to $100 million. It's another thing to have it be your family grow that whole thing.
Yeah, appreciate that. I think bootstrapping a business is more difficult, but it teaches you how to be a better operator, especially when you don't start a business with a lot of capital. It really teaches you how to do more with less, how to have your fingers on the pulse of everything that's happening in the company. I think micromanagement for a lot of companies sounds like a dirty word, but it actually creates a very efficient business that is very consistent and offers a very quality and consistent experience to the clients, as well as there's very little waste in the operations of the business. And the more efficiently we can run our business, the more value we can create to customers by offering lower prices than they can get elsewhere. So yeah, bootstrapping is hard, but it really teaches you how to be a really Navy SEAL of being an operator in a company.
Yeah, that forced discipline, right?
Yes, exactly.
In the world where profits actually matter. So when you think about the luxury watch business, what do you think people from outside the business don't understand about it?
People from outside the business, they either think that luxury watch industry is shrinking because there's digital watches out there. They often think it's very hard to get a luxury watch that they want, which was what we've built a system to solve. They often think it's only for an older male consumer, which is not true. 60% of our website visitors, which are now over 500,000 a month, and unique visitors on our website and 60% of them are under 40 years old. So it is the pre-owned luxury watch market is growing. It's being driven by a younger demographic, And, us, as well as some studies that have been done by McKinsey and BCG, see it growing pretty swiftly for the next 10 years or so.
When you think about this number, 40% per year growth, what are some of your principles that you think have made you so successful?
As far as principles, it's really figuring out what you're really, really good at. Don't spend too much money on marketing without focusing on the operations of the business. I've seen a lot of competitors try to grow through marketing, and then the first time there's a hiccup, they go in the red and either have to close shop or raise more funds. But really figuring out what is the value that you could give the consumer that others can't, and focusing on that one thing that you're really, really good at. Getting too many things in the platter is, I think, the most dangerous thing for an entrepreneur. I think there's so much opportunity all around, and your focus could go into other projects that all seem very, very good. But I think to be really great, you need to figure out what you could be the best at and focus on just that, and say no to many really good opportunities.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. What do you think that is for you? What do you think it is for you and your company of what you guys are really good at?
So we are very good at sourcing hard to find watches for our inventory. We have a watchmaking department, which was the founders, my parents, my stepfather's a master watchmaker trained at Rolex. That's how the business got started. Now we have an 11-person team around him, and he's still running that department. They are absolutely fanatical about the quality of the product. So we're selling watches anywhere from typically 2 years old to 30 years old. And on a weekly basis, we have people sending us emails or leaving reviews saying, love the watch, but you guys made a mistake. You said it was a used watch, pre-owned watch, but you sent me a new one by accident. I guess, I win. But it's not new. It is pre-owned. It just looks like new because that department is fanatical about the quality of the product that comes out. And when you talk about a pre-owned product, it's not necessarily the same depending on who you buy it from. Sending a watch back to the manufacturer costs between $900 and $1,500 and takes up to 9 months to receive back, to have them refurbish it. And we do that all in-house before we sell our inventory. So we have the best quality product. We have the widest selection in the business. We don't have customer service. We have a team of watch nerds that act as a sales team, a non-commissioned sales team. So they're never trying to upsell. They're really trying to educate you and make sure you're going to get the watch that you're going to be really happy with and making the right decision. So there's a lot of expertise from sourcing the watches, refurbishing the watches, to our sales team. And also, with today's world in e-commerce, everybody wants immediacy. So with 3,000 watches for sale right now, we actually offer same-day shipping guaranteed. So, you're in Utah right now, I believe. If you go on our website, you order a watch right now, as long as you do it before 4 p.m. Eastern time, we could overnight it to you and you're wearing it for dinner tomorrow, which is the opposite of most consumers think it's a long, complicated process to buy a luxury watch that they want.
Yeah. So speaking of hard to find watches, right now you guys have one of my favorite watches, kind of like a dream watch for me. It's I'm going to say it wrong, but it's a Patek, the Calatrava Pilot. And it doesn't look like a typical, like I call them dinner watches, like the more glitzy. It's like, to me, that feels like it could be more of a daily wearing watch, even though it's, a premium product. When you think about people's attachment, like for me, I think it's, originally I went to art school before I got into investment banking. And I'm not as much of a watch nerd on like the complications and the way a lot of watch people are. Like for me, it's so much about the aesthetics. When you think about the fascination that watches have, I mean, like you can buy something for $5 that keeps great time, from Japan or something, right? Like we've all got clocks on our phones. When you think about this like, I don't know, obsession, fascination, these kind of emotions people have around a timepiece. What do you attribute that to?
Well, these are mechanical works of art. They're handmade, and they, especially a Patek Philippe takes a very long time to be made by hand. But it's, for a lot of our consumers, which majority are male, it's, like you said, it's the aesthetics and it's their way to express individuality. For a lot of men, it's the only accessory they will wear. And it's also, it becomes a connection piece where, I've seen two shy, successful men walk into a party, not talk to anyone, and then they see each other from across the room and they notice each other's watch, and all of a sudden they're approaching each other by the bar and striking up a conversation. And that might be the only conversation they're having that evening with somebody they don't really know from before arriving there. So it really, it's hard to, everyone's craving connection in the world. And I've noticed that watch collectors love talking about their watches and where they got their watches. And that's why we get so much referral business. But there's definitely a big community around people that enjoy and collect luxury watches.
It is interesting. We have a mutual friend on LinkedIn who's a ultra high net worth individual. And at the event where I met him, there was someone else in the party who had a MB&F or work. And like, when I asked him about it, it was it was kind of my opening thing. Is that an Urwerk? It's an MB&F Urwerk, and he was like, you like watches? It was this funny, we were like nerdy 12-year-old boys or something, you know what I mean? And it really did start the conversation off, other than the casual, what do you do? And it
Exactly.
and I'm still in touch with that person, and it was actually kind of a fun thing. So let's talk for a minute. So it sounds like most, your best sellers are Patek, AP, and Rolex. Is that a good assumption?
We actually do so Rolex is about half the business. It is by far. And, the reason for that is, while they're producing over 1 million units a year, Patek Philippe is producing 75,000. They're the biggest player in the luxury watch space and the new luxury watch space. But that means there's a lot more pre-owned watches out there for Rolex as well. But we're selling a lot of Cartier, Omega, Breitling, Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe.
Do you like Panerai?
Cartier, I do. We do quite a bit of business there. It's not a top 5 brand for us, but we do a lot of Panerai business. And it was interesting. We had Stallone come in this summer and buy a few watches, and I got to meet him and spend some time with him. He invited me. He was staying in Atlanta, which is where we're based, filming Tulsa King 2. But he was telling me how he discovered Panerai when he was in Italy, and he's the one that put him on the map. And he said he walked in the store and bought the watch, bought them. There were a few $100s at the time, and just started wearing them everywhere. And it became, he really helped create that brand.
Yeah, I think I would be happier to wear that every day and a little less anxious about what happened to it, versus some of the really pricey ones, right? I mean, not that it's not pricey, but relatively, right, is missing a zero from the Patek that I want.
It's definitely a very sturdy watch, especially if it's in stainless steel.
Yeah. Let's talk about Patek for a minute. When you think about these brands that you get to work with, and you get to see who's running a good watch company, and you get to see who's doing a good job on public perception and demand for their product and things like this. Other than scarcity, what do you think Patek has going for it that maybe other brands don't? Why is Patek Philippe who they are?
They're part of the holy trinity of brands. They've been around. Them and Vacheron and Constantine, have been around pretty much the longest. And what they do really, really well is they know what the consumer wants, and they produce it in a quality that maintains its cachet and difficulty to get, which, what creates value, supply and demand. It doesn't matter what you're looking at, whether it's, Beanie Babies or crypto or watches or vacation homes like we talked about earlier. Whatever it is, it's all about supply and demand. they do a really good job of balancing that, where their supply is just below the demand that they have. So there's always, the value of their watches just stays consistent over time and oftentimes appreciates.
Yeah. I remember their ads 10 and 20 years ago that were so much about like, you don't own a Patek, you take care of one for the next generation, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But the the younger consumer has, they're when you look at the typical consumer that we have in their 20s and 30s, they don't that was kind of all luxury watches. You're buying it for your life and to pass it down to your kids. In the past, the younger consumer right now has a much higher, since we both come from finance, velocity of ownership. So they're no longer buying a watch thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to have this for 10, 20 years. They're looking at it as 6, 18 months, 24 months. As soon as I'm ready for something new, I'm going to come back to SwissWatchExpo, trade it in, and get another watch.
Really?
Yeah,
Um,
they have a much higher velocity to their collection.
and is the process for them, if they wanted to sell it back to you later, is that easier at all since you know the provenance of the watch a bit, or is it pretty much the same whether it came from you or not?
Yeah, it's much easier since we already know it's authentic. We will re-authenticate it because we have, we this year we'll sell 10,000 watches, over 10,000 luxury watches, which is a lot. So we have had scammers try to switch things up after trying to sell a watch, before trying to sell a watch back to us. But it does make the process much easier, and um, we're always really supportive of prior customers. So we don't actually do service and repair for for consumers that are not our customers. But if you already bought a watch from us, we'll do that for your other watches in your collection just to help you out.
Oh, wow.
The watchmaking department right now has like a 200 to 300 watch backlog in terms of our inventory that has to go through them before it's ready for sale. So we don't market that service externally. But if you're a customer of ours, we do that for your watch collection. So yes, we if you're a prior customer, we prioritize you in terms of communication. If there's a queue of 30 emails in the CRM, prior customers will get put to the top. In terms of supporting your collection, whether you bought it from us or elsewhere. If you're trying to sell a watch, we'll get back to you faster, ahead of others, and also try to, maybe even be a little bit more aggressive in the value as well.
Wow. What do you think AP does right as a brand, as a company?
I mean, similar to Patek Philippe, it stood the test of time. I think another, one thing that AP does right is they've had some really amazing collaborations with celebrities and prominent figures over the years.
Schwarzenegger for sure, right?
Yeah, exactly. A number of rappers, even they've done quite a bit. And while they're a brand that's been around a long time, they're not afraid to, have influencers and celebrity sponsors that are going to reach a newer generation.
Interesting. What an interesting thing to thread, right? Because you're risking some reputation risk, and yet the upside of becoming more culturally relevant can be so great for profits,
Yeah, yeah. With both Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, they are private companies. You being in the industry, you get the sense they do not care about what their sales are going to be next year, 2 years, or 3 years from now. They're thinking 50 to 100 years down the line. And the quality of the watches are from both companies are incredible, but the real staying power is the brand value that they've been able to build and the brand equity they've been able to build over time.
Yeah. Interesting. I want to switch gears. I want to talk about how you grew up and why you think that's been an advantage to you.
Yeah, we have a very interesting and I guess somewhat unique family history. Actually, we just celebrated 6 days ago our 35th anniversary of coming to the United States as refugees, and I'm going to dinner and Atlanta Symphony tonight with my parents to celebrate that. And I was just, you know, every year on that date, we toast to America. We're very proud to be Americans, and gave us the opportunity. And I look at some documents that I have from my immigration. I have ID card that says country of citizens, the ship stateless. I've got documents, stamped as admitted as a refugee, and just brings back a lot of memories that have made me who I am. But the history is this: we grew up in Ukraine. It was still part of the Soviet Union. We left as refugees in 1989, so it was before the Iron Curtain fell. And it was about a 5-6 months immigration process through immigration camps in Europe. We finally entered the United States. What was interesting about leaving the Soviet Union, it's not, first of all, they didn't really have a concept of leaving, because why would you leave such a perfect society? So you have to pretend that you're reuniting with family in the U.S. or actually reuniting with family in the U.S. If you didn't have family in the U.S., you would present fake letters of fake relatives in the U.S. saying, hey, I'm not leaving. Everything's great. We just need to see our family in the U.S. So we need to reunite. So it was Soviet Union was a very bizarre place. And then when you left, you weren't actually, it's not like you could sell your property and take it with you. So if you had jewelry, for instance, you would have to scratch off the 24 karat sign and do your best to pretend it's fake. Otherwise, it'd be confiscated at the border and legally confiscated. So we left. We came over with a few $100s. I was 6 years old. My parents were 26 years old. We didn't speak English, and start life all over, because we knew there was going to be much more opportunity for us in the United States. We didn't know where that was going to come from or how it was going to look, but we knew it was definitely going to be a lot more opportunity than there was in the Soviet Union. And I think it's really interesting how much success that immigrants in this country have had over the years. I mean, if you look at a lot of the biggest tech company founders, they're immigrants, and it's kind of a natural selection, because it takes a unique personality to risk your life, go to an unknown place, start all over, oftentimes with very little. But that's the same mentality that it often takes to be a successful entrepreneur. Those that are okay being comfortable and unhappy don't make good entrepreneurs, and they usually don't end up being immigrants either, if they're able to stay in the country they're at.
I think about this. Even though I was an American born abroad, like I was telling you before the show, I grew up in Canada for 90%, 99% of my growing up years, and the great things about Canada. I love Canada. Friends, family back there. But if you want to make your own future, you're willing to take personal responsibility. I just think the U.S. is the best country in the world for that. It's not that other countries are good, but somebody's got to be the best. And I just think in America, there's nowhere like this, where your past doesn't have to determine your future, where the government isn't getting in your way, where, I don't know, there's just so many advantages. And on this podcast, I can't tell you how many immigrants have been on this podcast and have built, these multi-billion or $10 billion plus companies. And it's fascinating. Nobody handed them anything. They were just willing to spend the time to learn the patterns and do the compound interest on those patterns and never stop learning. And I just think it's crazy inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, if you're smart and you've got grit, there's so many ways to be successful in this country. And we both worked on Wall Street for some time, and I saw plenty of folks on Wall Street that were immigrants too, and they're extremely successful. And it was a meritocracy. If you're making money for your team and your fund or your bank, you're going to get compensated well, and nobody really cares where you came from.
The year I went to Citi, my income 10 times that year for that reason. No,
wow,
it's because I was young and the previous job wasn't that great, but it's also a testament to, pay for performance.
Yeah. I bet you if they knew that, they probably would have paid you a little less, because they're like, he doesn't need this much. They probably
maybe
didn't
I
know
exaggerate.
that.
Maybe it went up 8 times, but it was.
That's incredible. That's awesome.
So talk about your parents. What do you admire about them? Why are you who you are?
So when you're a young child, you're influenced easily about what's happening around you. And we came over, it wasn't just us, it was a whole community of us. We settled in Philadelphia area, and everybody was doing different jobs in the Soviet Union and trying to figure their way out in the United States. The first couple of years, you're in welfare, shopping with food stamps, but it wasn't just my parents, but most of their friends. Within 5 to 7 years, everybody ended up with a house in the suburbs that they owned and a Lexus or Mercedes in a driveway, which is incredible. But seeing that as a young child, seeing the hard work they were putting in, seeing that no matter how hard things were getting, that they were positive at all times. Uh, I admire that. I don't know if it's the Eastern European culture or what it is, but there was very little complaining about things. No matter what was going on, there's not much complaining. You're always thinking about the future and how it's going to be brighter, not complaining about what's happening in the past, which is an amazing quality for any entrepreneur as well. Um, optimists tend to get more done than pessimists, I think. Um, but for them to risk, you know, this process and coming to a new country and, you know, create a life for themselves and give, the whole community really coming for their children to have a better life. It was very inspirational. And it's funny, when I was, 6, 7 years old, my grandparents came over also, and it would be like, oh, we left our life to this new country just so you could have a better future. So I was like, okay, well, no pressure. So I'm not going to be lazy. If everybody left so I could have a better future, I'm going to make it count. Um, so what I admire about my parents are they're optimists. They've always worked really, really hard. Um, they always treated people from all walks of life fairly. They don't really care where you come from, which I think sometimes gets lost in modern society. Those values, they and they care about family very much. So I think those traditional values. I think we kind of step back from those traditional values as a society, but I think they're going to be coming back in the next few years.
Yeah. Integrity is a really good long-term investment, right?
Yeah, I mean and when I look for employees, integrity is one of the things I try to poke at and figure out if they do have integrity, because it's one of the top traits that you need from good employees.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it makes me want to meet your parents. They sound awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
they're amazing people.
I want to go back to the business. You look at somebody like the Walton family, who become, the wealthiest family in the world, um, selling low margin, high volume, and they get really good at it. Um, and then you look at somebody like Bernard Arnault and LVMH, and they take the exact opposite tactic, and he becomes the richest person in the world for. I mean, I know it changes every other day, but that's how it is. And to me, there's kind of a fun lesson in that there's. I think it's so optimism producing for me that there's not just one way to make it in life, which I know is obvious, and there's no one who would say there's only one way, but it's fun to see such drastically different strategies that can produce such high results. And one of the things that people love about the luxury world is that there can be higher margins, or you can be dealing with bigger numbers, right? When you think about the next couple of years or the future of the luxury world, whether that's airplanes, watches, fashion, I'm doing, real estate fund, we're doing those luxury vacation homes. When you think about that customer, what insights do you have? What advice do you have for people in those worlds appealing to that premium customer?
So there's a saying in the pre-owned luxury watch space, when you're from a consumer's perspective, don't buy the watch, buy the seller. So for us, it's always, how do we ensure we have the best reputation in the industry? Because there's so much trepidation from consumers, especially shopping online, which is 90% of our business is online. So winning their trust, and then they will come back to us and continue to be repeat customers, buy presents for their spouse, buy presents for your kid, sell some watches they don't wear, becomes a whole flywheel, as well as refer people to us. So for us, it's really winning the consumer's trust and taking an experience which is still scary for a lot of people when buying a watch online, and there's scam sites and fakes and all this, and realizing they can trust us. But really it's, having really wide selection, having the best quality inventory, having a very educated sales team, running an efficient business so we could pass those cost savings to the consumer, being transparent. We don't negotiate prices at all. So somebody wants $50 off a $20,000 watch more than we're offering, the salesperson knows the answer is no, because we don't want to play any games with consumers. And when it's part of winning their trust, they know that, just because they tried a little harder, they're not going to save money a week from now. And really standing behind our product if anything ever happens with it, or if it needs a service or repair. But the idea of the business, I was always, even before I got into it, a huge fan of Jeff Bezos. And and that a lot of people don't realize he started his career on Wall Street too, just like you and I. He started his career at a hedge fund called D. Shaw. He was a very successful guy, and he left with the dream to sell books online. It wasn't to build a cloud computing business and sell everything. It was just to sell books. And the reason he picked books were because it was a very large catalog of different books out there, and they were small enough to easily store and ship. Well, I'm glad Jeff Bezos didn't know about luxury watches, because there's so many different models in the pre-owned luxury watch space. They're small and they have a high value and they're easy to ship. So from an e-commerce perspective, it's just, I think, one of the best products you could really build a successful e-commerce business that will have a flywheel. Hey, we're only spending 2 to 3% of our sales and marketing a year, because so much of our business comes from referrals.
I think that's such a great word. And I don't think there's anybody who would say you don't need trust in your business or things like this. But you think about, especially when an individual, maybe it's more of an aspirational purchase or it's their first giant purchase, something like this, there's a lot of anxiety about making the mistake. And it's interesting, how trust can override price or things like that, right?
Yeah. You might save a couple $100 going elsewhere, but the watch ends up being a replica or not working properly and costs you thousands of dollars to fix, and you don't have it for 9 months. It's not a good experience. And our customers, what's awesome about the business, they're coming to us, they're usually celebrating something, a birthday, anniversary, a promotion, their kid's graduation. So this is a product they're usually purchasing around an occasion that they're celebrating. And we get to be a small part of making that memory for them. And, when they look back at that occasion that they celebrated and they're enjoying their watch, they'll remember us, which I think is amazing. It's definitely a lot more pleasant working with customers that are happy. I'm glad I'm not in the dentist business, because no one's excited to come to the dentist. Where people come to us, they're excited.
Man, those poor people who work for airlines, right? Oof.
Yeah, it's rough.
That's tough. Well, listen, you have such an exceptional story, and yet there are so many ambitious immigrants who have not been able to accomplish what you have accomplished. What do you think is different about you? What's stuff that you do that not everybody else does?
I have a lot of curiosity, and a lot of patience in terms of results. And I genuinely enjoy business as a sport. I get up and I'm excited to deal with the problems. I'm excited to find innovative solutions. I'm excited to try new things, but it's a dynamic sport for me. And this is what kind of gets me up in the morning and gets me going. It's almost a hobby as well. I mean, I don't play golf and, so this is, you have to have a passion for what you're doing. You have to have a lot of curiosity, because you're always need to be learning something new, and you have to be able to spend immense amount of hours at the task. It's a lot of people do it, but the initial innings of a business, your mindset kind of has to be 100% on the business. It's very hard if you're, thinking about a lot about either your family or your vacations or your hobbies. Not that you can't have a family, but I think for especially the initial years of the business, those critical years till you get to a scale where you have some support and profits and so forth within the business, you have to be 100% all in.
Yeah, that's great. Well, listen, will you give everybody the website one more time?
SwissWatchExpo.com or SwissWatchExpo on Instagram. If anybody wants to reach out to us, we'll give you a most unique experience. So we spend most of our day, we have a 7-person sales team, and they spend most of the day on FaceTime and Zoom showing off our collection of 3,000 watches to customers all over the world. It's been an awesome journey, and if anybody wants to get in touch with us, we'll give you a very memorable experience.
Yeah, I heard you on another interview talking about how that sales rep will oftentimes actually go get the watch and be physically holding it and talking to you about it. And
not oftentimes, always.
Oh, really?
So if a customer reaches out to us, so one thing that's unique about our business, where if you talk to any scaled e-commerce business, their goal is to have customers contact them as less as possible, because that's an expense. They want them to go on the website and just buy. If you look at any watch on our website, there's a button that says request FaceTime, and you click that button and you will literally get a message very soon after with a few times that work. And when you accept those times, you will be on FaceTime with our team. You'll get to meet me, my family. We're still a 35-person company, so we're a small business. You get to meet the watchmakers that worked on your watch, and you will get to see the watches in the salesperson's hand that you're considering buying, and you will get a massive amount of information on the watches, education, to make sure that you're making a really good decision before you purchase them. And then I don't think anyone really is offering an experience like that. And, I had an investor approach me a couple years ago, and he's like, well, you have the sales team, it's expensive, to run sales team like that, that's very competent and educated. How do you get more people to just buy on the website? I was like, I don't want that. Because yes, it's a more expensive process, but that customer will remember that process, and they will go and tell their friends about it. And they're like, oh my God, you guys see this operation. I've never seen this many watches. It's a really unique design we have here in the showroom. I saw a dozen watchmakers in the back opening up watches, and he zoomed in on that. It was so neat. And then I got a watch that was 2 or 20 years old and it looked like it was brand new. Whereas if they just bought it on the website and they got a watch and they were happy with the product, it still looked great, they may or may not tell the story to their friends.
Yeah, it's like, I love Warren Buffett's follower, Howard Marks, Howard Oaktree, right? And
yeah.
He talks so much about aspects of that. This kind of, Warren Buffett says it too, the cliche of people won't remember the price, but they'll remember how you made them feel when they were getting it from you.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's for sure. We are a small part of their lives, but a big part of their watch collecting journey. And whenever they think about buying or selling a watch, they always come back to us once they're our client the first time. because we make that experience very memorable. We make it as seamless as they want it. And we're transparent and we stand up to all our promises always.
I love it. Okay. Thanks for making time to do this.
Thanks, Jess. It was awesome to connect. Let's chat sometime soon offline.
Okay. Bye, everyone.